And this slide is all about basics everyone should know. Rent is due in quotes by Jesse Lee. And then we have 4 of these topics. So anybody here not in debt yet? No? Everyone has debt? Okay, well, I don't have to explain that to you then. But I love debt. I passed 8 figures of debt a few years ago. I still maintain more than 8 figures of debt. And the way that I got there was by really having a good understanding of these 4 metrics and rent is due. The first one's a rate factor. Now raise your hands. Who here knows what that is? Okay, so this is going to be really important to write down. If you want to go into debt, you have to know this if you want to really scale your debt anyway. A rate factor is your cost of capital expressed as a percentage. If you like formulas, all it means is your annual principal and interest divided by your loan amount. That's all it is. Super simple. But if you can know these 2 things, a rate factor and a cap rate, you can borrow as much money as you want and make a profit. So your rate factor expresses your true cost of capital. For example, 6% interest loan, 30-year AM, your interest rate 6%, your cost of capital is 7.2. That's really important to know because anybody here know what a cap rate is? It's your dividend when you pay cash. So one of these things is a dividend, one of these things is a cost. The magic with borrowing money if you're buying income real estate, your cap rate, all it is your cash on cash return when you pay cash. That's all it is. So it's your NOI, right here, all these work together. Your NOI, that's the cash flow you have if you have no debt, divided into your purchase price. That's all it is, or into your value. So you take your NOI, your cash flow if you have no debt, you divide it into your purchase price or your value, it's going to give you a cap rate. All that is your dividend. The magic of this real estate game, if you want to borrow money, your dividend has to be higher than your cost. And again, for those who are writing it down, I recommend you write it down. Most lenders don't even know what a rate factor is, yet they work with rate factors all day long. It's your annual principal and interest divided by the loan amount. That'll give you your true cost of capital, and your cap rate has to be higher than your rate factor. The last thing that you can do to make things cash flow is play with amortization. Now this is something you can do with DSCR loans. You could do a 25-year, 30-year, I think you could do 40-year in interest only, right? So or 100-year, like you referenced. The longer you stretch it out, the lower your overall cost of capital is as a percentage. You may pay more interest, but you can lower your actual payment structure. So these are all things that you should know. And we can switch slides. So as far as wins, there's a few creative ways. I figured we'd talk about creative finance, and I guess I'm never going to do this PowerPoint filter again because that didn't look the same on my computer. But talking about a few wins with the financing game, and a little context, I bought a few hundred rentals around the time that I could drink my first beer, and I made a lot of mistakes along the way. But some of the wins that I did make, because I didn't have any money, came down to delayed down payments. So one way I got super low down payments on a lot of my deals is I structured it to the seller where maybe I do 5% down, 10% down, but I'll do 2 or 3% down every single year for the coming years. So if you're trying to structure a low down deal, have a lot of your down payment come into future years and then structure it with an interest rate and an amortization where the cash flow will pay that. So I bought a 7-unit in Tequila with 4.5% down. It cash flowed about 30 grand a year. And so what I did is I structured an additional $20,000 a year of down payment. So the property made my down payment for me, and I got in with 4.5% down. It was almost a FHA loan down payment. So delaying your down payments, great way to make a win. I've done that on a few deals. Partner buyouts. How you start is not necessarily how you're going to finish. I bought a few deals with partners, bought a couple hundred rentals, and I sold some, and I bought partners out of some. Problem is, when I did my buyouts, I didn't always have the money. Sometimes we don't. So rather than going to a bank and potentially getting an interest rate at 6%, 8%, getting a second mortgage at 12%, what I ended up doing is I went to my partners and I said, would you guys entertain being a second mortgage against title rather than being my partner? You'll get fixed income. So one of the first properties I ever bought, it was a 38-unit apartment building. I had a couple partners, rather than giving them cash that I didn't have or going to the bank and refinancing my cheap seller finance note, I asked them to take a promissory note. So they actually signed over their ownership, and I got control of a bigger asset than I could afford to own conventionally. And now I just have to make payments to them out of the cash flow of the deal. So basically, a partner can sell or finance their ownership to you too. That's a fun structure. And then bank first and seller second. I bought a deal with my buddy Cam, an 8-unit apartment building, and the seller said, can't sell or finance, won't sell or finance, can't do it, we have a loan. They needed like 85 to 90% down to clear their loan. And that's not a fun amount, that's not a good check to write. 90% down, it's not gonna work. So what I proposed to them was, what if you guys, what if I go get a bank loan for 75% of the money, you guys finance a second mortgage rather than a first, so they finance a little loan behind the bank, and then I put 10% down. So what we ended up doing is, the bank, Columbia Bank, ended up giving us 75% of the money. The seller financed in second position for 15%, and we bought an 8-plex with 10% down. Columbia Bank can do it, MC Bank can do it in Washington, and Cashmere Valley Bank can do it. And Cashmere Valley Bank right now is in the high fives, so they're a good resource for anybody that needs commercial loans. And that's it for wins. So now we can go to lessons. There are more lessons here. First one, delayed down payments. So just because you can doesn't mean you should. That is a huge way to get into deals, and you can create a lot of wins. However, if you don't do it right, that actually ties into Walla Walla. The city is not bad, but a deal I did there was unfortunate. If you get too creative, it can go south. So I did a deal. I'll start with the delayed down payments. I bought a resort, and don't get out of your lane, bad idea. Well, I did delayed down payments that were bigger than the property could produce. So basically I did $1 million down, borrowed that with hard money, also a bad idea. Did additional down payment of $225,000 a year. I thought the property would pay for it. I was wrong because I'd never bought a hotel before. And so what I ended up signing up for was a high interest down payment and additional down payments every year. That was a very painful spot to be. It was too big. The property couldn't afford it. So make sure if you're doing delayed down payments that you are not making them so big to where you're coming out of pocket. Because what that did is it ended up siphoning all of my cash flow from my whole portfolio for a couple of years until I could sell the property. Not a good place to be. Prepayment penalties. My first ever 12-plex that I bought, was my first building. I did 10-year prepayment penalty at 10%. That was the way I got into the deal, but basically it made my prepayment penalty $100,000. Not great, so I'm locked into that loan. And so that can be a good way to get in, but try and avoid prepayment penalties at all costs if you can. It's worth just figuring out how to negotiate around it. And if you're getting DSCR loans, make sure you're careful which ones you sign up for. I had a DSCR lender who locked me into a 5 for 5, so basically it was a hard 5% prepayment penalty for 5 years. I didn't know that. They didn't tell me that, so I got stuck. And it's on a little triplex, so I can't get out of it. Yield maintenance basically says you're guaranteeing a certain amount of interest. This is going to be more so for commercial loans, but some lenders, if seller finance deals, may want this. Basically it says if it's 5 years yield maintenance, if you refinance it in the first year or the fourth year, you're paying the full 5 years of interest. It's very expensive, don't do it, avoid it at all costs. Balloons. The reason I have that little photo over there on the bottom right, that is a property that I bought, zero money down. It was also next to the hotel I bought, and I bought it seller finance. It was a 3-year balloon. The deal itself was great. Cash flow, made sense, beautiful home on the Hood Canal, if anybody knows where that is. I love it. It's absolutely gorgeous, and it was a 3-year balloon, which means that in 3 years I'd have to pay off the loan in full. I'd have to refinance it, pay it off, sell it, whatever it may be. I can't have that loan anymore. Well, 3 years came up and interest rates were significantly higher than they were when I bought it. When I bought it, rates were in the 4s, and when I refinanced it, rates were in the 7s. And I was forced to do it, otherwise the seller would sue me and work on taking it back. A good rule of thumb, if you're going to do any type of long-term rentals, make sure that your balloon's at least 7 years or longer. 7 years is better than 5 years. I would never do a 3. If you're doing hard money, then you're not gonna get 7 years. You probably don't wanna hold hard money for 7 years. But any long-term rental, make sure you have more time than less. Now, to wall to wall, I got a little out of order earlier. I got too creative for my own good. For anybody, have you ever met someone who owns multiple properties side by side? Anybody here? So some of them are willing to seller finance, but they want 50% down, 60% down. So imagine you own these 2 duplexes. You buy one FHA, and then they're gonna get the rest of the money from the bank. So they're basically getting 100% down on one, and then they could 100% seller finance the second duplex. So you get it for no money down. So essentially you're buying 2 duplexes for less than 3.5% down overall. It's a great way to do it. Well, I was trying to do that on 81 units in Walla Walla. They had it was like a 30 unit, 40 unit, and something else. And I was trying to do a conventional purchase on one of the deals, and that was gonna be the entire down payment. It was like the one I was buying conventionally, it was like $4 million. I was gonna raise $1 million down. The bank was gonna bring another 3. So they were getting $4 million up front, but majority of it was from a bank. So I was essentially buying $8.1 million of real estate for $1 million down that I was gonna raise. It was a high leverage point. And where it got complicated is they were gonna seller finance 100% of these deals, the other side of the portfolio, the other properties. And so the bank rates had gone up. I had nothing in my contract to prevent that. So I didn't have a rate lock on my bank loan, and rates go up, it kills the deal. Well, now we go into a lawsuit because I can technically buy the 0 down deals, but I couldn't perform on the bank loan. So if you're gonna get creative and you wanna piece deals together where you buy one conventionally, they finance 100% of the second one, just make sure that you have your rate lock figured out. Don't let rates creep up on you. Have an out to exit the contract. We had to fight over earnest money. I won the lawsuit and lost a lot of money. That's typically how that stuff works. So just be careful with how creative you get. And the last lesson, your strategy of capital gains versus cash flow. I didn't see, raise your hands for the flippers here. So flipping's great. You can make a lot of money flipping. It's very hard to get wealthy flipping. So be careful as you're taking on debt, how much you allocate towards capital gains where you're trying to grow the money pot versus cash flow, how much actual income comes in. My recommendation would be to try and really focus on the cash flow front. The more cash flow you have, the more debt you can service. The more debt you have, the less taxes you pay. And that can get you big liquidity events later. It's really attractive to focus on capital gains first, but I'd encourage everyone to focus on cash flow, and those are my lessons learned from the mistakes I've made.
Woo! Come on, clap for them, Okay, I got one question before I'll let you sit down, before we invite you back up in a little bit for a panel. One, thank you for coming. You live in Moses Lake now, yeah?
I'm tired.
Yeah. Cody came all the way from Moses Lake to be here for WARI. Can you share with the room a little bit about how WARI maybe was a part of you starting and investing?
Yeah, so I actually have this on my Instagram.
Yeah.
But I made a post on WARI back in 2018 looking for a mentor. And I found one through the group. Less than a year later, I bought my 12-plex, 0 money down. So that was pretty cool. But I was just trying to buy a duplex at 21. I was 18, turning 19, made a post, met some folks, got some coffee meetings in the books, and I went to events in Tacoma. And I don't know when the first event was held here, but I think I was there.
Yeah.
So that was a few years ago. But I just started going to events, meeting with people, asking questions. And in the process, started to learn a little bit about a little bit. Found my niche, which was multifamily apartments. Unfortunately, strayed out of multifamily, got into hotels. Every hotel I ever bought, I lost money on, so that was a bummer. But I met a lot of good people, and I wouldn't be here without WARI for sure, because I was going to work at Safeway. I worked there for 7 minutes before I walked out.
Yeah. Joke. So good. And I don't do that to highlight WARI, but as much as I want to highlight just the power of reaching out, saying, I want to do something, I want help, and then to look where it can bring you in such a short amount of time. Tell the room how old you are.
26.
Who in the room is younger than that? Alright, couple, yeah, and the half of the room that's under
I do
26,
flex.
Cody's partnered with. What about that? Raise your hand if you're older than 26.
That's what I would do.
Yeah, okay, cool.
If I go back,
How
I
many
thought
units
I'd
in your portfolio are
I
now?
would try flex.
I have about 100 without partners. Now, that was a big shift. I used to have over double that, but having more of your portfolio by yourself is a blessing. So I focused the last year and a half of consolidating down. So I sold over half the portfolio and doing some development now with my buddy Cam. So we're building we're doing 14 first and then another 14 townhomes after that.
Awesome, so
Pretty
good.
exciting,
Wow.
yeah.
And then as Cody walked in the door today, him and Cam went, oh yeah, and then we got like 81 units under contract today.
41.
Oh, 41, that's what it was, casual. 41 units under contract today. Thank you for letting me pick your mind a little bit more on your portfolio. The one question I had for you before you sit down is, how the heck do you keep track of your debt with all of the creative things going on? How do you track it?
It's just on a spreadsheet. So I'd recommend whether you have one duplex or nothing right now, as you scale, I'd get what's called a schedule of assets, the SAO. So you're gonna just list out all your assets, the addresses, and then you can have a debt schedule on the side of it, and you can have your rents, your NOI, the cash flow you have if you had no debt, and then have your operating expenses. You can map everything out. And so I just have a list, it's on Excel. And
Easy peasy.
something like that.
From our lenders in the room, who would love seeing their investors have a schedule of assets like that? Is that relevant? Yeah, for sure. Hey, will you guys do me a favor? Will you clap for Cody Davis? If you guys